Well, Bore da pawb, good morning everyone, and might be a little bit late, but can I wish you everyone a happy new year, blwyddyn newydd dda I bawb. So the first item on the agenda is the apologies. Lisa, which apologies have we had, please?
We've had John Evan Jones, John Brinmore Hughes, Austin Roberts, Paul Cunningham, and Sharon Dolman, Gareth R. Jones, and Beverly Parry Jones have given notice that they may need to leave early.
Thank you. Is anybody aware of any other apologies that we may have missed? I can't see any hands being raised. Okay, thank you, Lisa. So we go on to item number 2, which is the declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, please? I can't see any hands being raised, so I take it that's a no. So item number 3 is notice of urgent matters. I haven't received any notice of urgent matters, so that does not apply. So we go on to item number 4, which are the minutes of the last 2 meetings that have been held. And we start with the meeting that was held on the 16th of October. So we'll deal with those in terms of accuracy, first of all. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and page 10. I can't see anybody raising their hand, so I presume that you are happy with the accuracy. Can I have somebody propose that we accept them? Mark, you proposing? And Arwen is seconding. Will you show that you agree with the minutes? Thank you very much, Diolch yn fawr, and thank you to Lisa for those excellent minutes and their accuracy. Matters arising from those minutes. The only one that jumps out to me is item paragraph 15.7 in relation to the new training centre. Don't know if the Deputy Chief Fire Officer is able to give us an update as to whether or not there's been any further development since then. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the latest update is following that meeting when members gave approval for purchase of the land. We've now engaged the lawyers who are working with the seller's lawyers, and all the relevant things are being put in place to hopefully expect finalising the purchase of the land over the next few weeks into next month.
Thank you for that update. Are there any other matters arising from those minutes that members wish to raise? I can't see any other hands. So we move on to the minutes from the meeting held on the 18th of December. So if we deal with them, first of all, in terms of accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. Can't see any hands being raised, so I presume that you're happy to accept them as an accurate record. Can I have somebody to propose, please? Thank you, Councillor Jeff Evans, a seconder. Thank you, Arwen. Will you show that you accept the minutes? Thank you very much. And then I don't know, Chief, if you want to say anything in relation to the held on the 18th of December.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. I'm pleased to announce that we are starting a task and finish group, and that will be led by Area Manager Ant Jones. The formal meeting with the FBU has already taken place, and they have been offered a place on that task and finish group. We have sent out requests for any employee who works on any duty system to be part of that, because we want as many views as possible. And we're intending to have the first meeting before the end of the month, and then we will be developing options and bringing them back to the members of the Fire Authority as soon as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, for that update. Are there any other matters arising from the minutes of that meeting? I can't see any hands being raised. So in that case, we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Chair's report. So you'll have had sight of the report from myself and from the Deputy Chair in terms of the events and meetings that we've been involved in. Are there any questions or comments that members might wish to raise? Can't see any hands, so the report is just for noting. Can I have a proposer that you note the report, please? Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Gareth. Will you show that you accept the report? Diolch yn fawr. Thank you. So we move on to item number 7, which is the provisional outturn for 2023-2024. I'm going to hand over to Assistant Chief Fire Officer Helen. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair, and Bore da pawb. This is the first paper and sets out the current year-end forecast for the 2023-24 financial year. All of the papers today are interrelated, and therefore there may be some slight replication between them. In January 2023, the Fire Authority approved the net budget of 44.4 million, and this is the amount that is to be met from the levy from our constituent local authorities. Members will also recall that during the budget setting process, there was considerable discussion around the difficult financial environment and the challenges that were being faced by their own councils in setting their budgets, and also recognition of the non-recurring measures taken that we took to defer expenditure into future years. We temporarily held vacancies to our establishment, and you also approved the use of reserves in the short term. I won't revisit this in detail, but the information is provided within the budget setting paper report that was presented during January 2023. When the budget was set, the pay award of firefighters had not been agreed for either 2022 or 23, or indeed the 23-24 financial year. And at that time, it was necessary to make some planning assumptions. You'll be well aware that these subsequently settled above those assumptions and therefore have put an in-year budget pressure for us, which has required the further utilisation of reserves. The current working assessment is that actual expenditure will be in the range of 45.3 million, which will require the use of approximately 900,000 of reserves. The position is slightly better than it would have been, as we've received £500,000 of non-recurring income from the local government pension scheme revaluation. Our gross employee costs will exceed budget by 800,000, and this has been reduced to 300,000 following that windfall income. And the overspend is largely attributed to pay awards and overtime, and is also being managed very, very carefully through the mitigation in the short term through those vacancies. Overtime is only payable to operational staff, and we include a budget for contractual overtime, such as staying at an operational incident if it spans the end of a shift. However, non-contractual overtime is paid to operational staff to maintain either the watch strength on our whole time stations or availability in our rural areas. And I would highlight to members within the report, you will see that spend for the full year is forecast to be in the order of £600,000. The non-pay budget is 10.4 million, but although it has been carefully managed, the current costs are forecast to exceed this. However, this is also an area of significant uncertainty due to inflation and supply chain issues. And within this, the premises budget of 3.5 million covers over 50 of our buildings and includes a range of expenditure from energy, non-domestic rates, insurance, and also the statutory maintenance and repairs. The overspend includes this maintenance and includes essential works to address health and safety issues. In addition, the backlog arising from COVID has been addressed this year and is part of the overspend. I'm pleased to be able to report that this is not likely to recur within the future financial year. The availability of materials now appears to be less of an issue, albeit that the costs remain high, and we do manage the availability of our contractors. It's going to be a key area of focus during 2024-5 as we seek to embed social value within our facilities contracts. The transport budget is also an area of spend that's carefully managed and includes 1.3 million to cover all of our fleet. And that includes both our emergency response vehicles and also vehicles that provide services to our communities through activities such as home safety support. The service has a rolling programme of vehicle replacement, and the availability of parts is a major factor for our older vehicles and often drive the replacement decision. The fuel costs have stabilised, but fuel prices have risen, and the forecast in the papers reflects this. Expenditure on supplies accounts for over half of our budget and includes a range of essential costs, which include ICT software and hardware, operational consumables, and the testing and maintenance of operational equipment, such as our BA sets. We also include small items of operational equipment, as well as the purchase of PPE. Within this budget head, there are a number of significant challenges, which include the costs associated with the PPE, hardware licenses for our phones, in which we've seen significant inflationary uplifts. Also, the need to make provision within our insurance for any costs not covered under the excess, and also the costs associated with consultation. The third-party payments relate to expenditure with other bodies, such as North Wales Police for our facilities management, Flintshire for the administration of the pension scheme for local government colleagues, and the monitoring officer, and also Carmarthenshire for the firefighter pension scheme. We also pay a small amount to Conway for support in relation to our legal aspects of our property matters. And I think that demonstrates that where possible, we do collaborate with our public sector partners. The budget for our capital financing costs is 3.1 million and relates both to the interest on loans, but also the charge to revenue for using the assets. The forecast on this budget line is an underspend against budget, which is due to the fact that we've utilised internal cash to avoid borrowing. We've also invested our surplus cash and benefited from interest received. This has been possible as we've held surplus cash at the start of the year following support from the Welsh Government for pensions, and also phasing of our payments such as national non-domestic rates. The details sitting behind these high-level figures has been presented to the Budget Scrutiny Working Group, which met on 4 occasions during October and November. And there are currently plans to develop this area of work and start the process much earlier. For members that aren't aware, this is a subgroup of the Audit Committee made up of members from each local authority. This work will continue and aid the detailed understanding of members and also support the budget preparations for future years. In summary, the expenditure forecast of 45.3 is consistent with the budget setting, but has required the management of our in-year pressures. The pay pressures have been mitigated through carrying essential vacancies, and the non-pay pressures have been managed through lower than forecast interest charges. The outturn position will require utilisation of reserves, which is in line with the budget setting and includes the pay settlement above the planning assumptions. It's worthy of note that grant funding also totals 900,000, of which 600,000 relates to services delivered for arson reduction, the purchase of home safety equipment, and youth and young person engagement. These grants have not been increased for a number of years, and you will know from previous reports that there is uncertainty over these in the future. However, for 2023-24, there are no issues to note within the report. Turning to the capital programme, the overall budget is 7.2 million, and the forecast expenditure at the year end is 5.3. It's anticipated that funding will be via the use of borrowing, but also through the use of earmarked reserves, our internal resources. Borrowing at the year end of Q2 was 22.2 million, reflecting the positive cash flows, but as the capital programme progresses, it will be necessary to take out further borrowing. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions on the report that members may have.
Thank you, Helen. Before I invite questions from members, I'm going to hand over to our Treasurer, David. Bore da, David.
Bore da, Cadeirydd. Diolch yn fawr iawn chi am ddod ni fewn, a diolch i Helen am y cyflwyniad yna. Mae yna nifer o adroddiadau ariannol ger bron bore yma, ond fel chi, dwi'n meddwl byddwn ni drwyddyn nhw'n eitha handi, achos mae'n dir da ni wedi bod drosto fo mewn un siap neu ffurf. Byddwch yn cofio nôl ym mis Chwefror dwytha 23, mi oedd yna gytundeb tâl i'r diffodwyr tân, oedd uwch ben be oedd yn rhagdybiaeth ni o ran chwyddiant sâl. Ac mi oedd hynny'n golygu bron flwyddyn yn ôl, mi oeddwn ni yn bwriadu defnyddio tua 2 filiwn o gronfeydd wrth gefn yr awdurdod fel rhwyd diogelwch yn 23-24. Be da ni wedi ffeindio ydy, mae yna lot o swings around fel sydd wedi bod yn ystod y flwyddyn, ond yn gyffredinol, da ni'n defnyddio chydig bach llai o'r cronfeydd wrth gefn yna, da ni'n defnyddio tua 1 miliwn ohono fo mwyn mantoli. Oedden ni rioed am wneud yr holl swm i fyny, ond mae'n reit dda, da ni mewn sefyllfa gwell nag oedden ni'n rhagweld 11 mis yn ôl. Wedyn mae'r alltro dros dro bellach yn awgrymu byddwn ni ond yn defnyddio tua 1 miliwn o'r cronfeydd wrth gefn yna, tua 900,000 yn 23-24. A mae hynny mewn ffordd yn rhyddhau defnydd un tro o tua 1 miliwn arall o'n cronfeydd wrth gefn ni wrth osod cyllideb 24-25. A mi ddawn ni at hynny yn yr eitem nesaf. Ond o'n i'n meddwl sa'n ddoeth i ni just linkio'r ddau eitem fel yna, Mr Cadeirydd. A diolch i Helen a'r Helen arall am roed yr holl fanylion a'r ffigurau at ei gilydd yma.
Diolch yn fawr, Dafydd. I've learnt a new technical term within the budgetary process now, swings and roundabouts. Are there any questions, please, from members? Can't see any hands being raised. Helen, perhaps I could just pick up on one question. I know you've touched on this, but paragraph 26 talks about that the premises costs are projecting an overspend of 0.576 million. I know, as I say, you did touch on it, but it does sound a significant figure. Are you able to give us a bit more sort of detail as to why those quite so high?
Thank you, Chair. I think it largely reflects the impact of COVID. So certainly for a number of years, we weren't able to progress with the works within our stations. In part, that was because of lockdown and COVID. Secondly, then when those COVID restrictions started to lift, we couldn't get contractors, or the price of materials made it very, very difficult. So actually 23-24 has been very much our catch-up year. So we've got those costs. We've caught up with that routine maintenance, the backlog of the smaller items. So as we enter 24-25, the pressures within our buildings won't be to the same level.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from any of the members? No, I can't see any hands being raised. So if I can draw your attention to the recommendations in the report, which is at paragraph 5, and it says members are asked to note the draft revenue and capital outturn projections for 2023-24 financial year as detailed within the report. Note the risks associated with inflation and supply chain issues, and approve the use of earmarked and general fund reserves. Could I have a proposer, please? Thank you, Councillor Mark Young, and a seconder. Thank you, Michelle. Will you show that you approve the recommendations, please? Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. So we go on to item number 8, which is the budget setting for 24-25. And I don't know if David wants to introduce this item to begin with and then hand over to Helen MacArthur. Thank you, David.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Yn gyffredinol, mae rhaid i'r awdurdod tân osod cyllideb a hysbysir awdurdodau cyfansoddol o'r arddull. Mae hynny wedi fanylu yn yr adroddiad yma. Dwi'n credu bod ni ar wahân o ran y cae da ni eisiau gosod cyllideb yno fo. Da ni wedi cael lot o drafodaethau dros y flwyddyn dwytha am y cover review, ac mae hynny wedi dod allan efo opsiwn 1 o ran y lefel ariannu. Wedyn, mae'r gweithgor o'r pwyllgor archwilio dan gadeirydd Mark Young. Mae hwnnw'n gwneud gwaith ardderchog yn lleihau rhywfaint ar yr cynnydd yn y gyllideb oedd yn anwrfod oherwydd gwahanol ffactorau fel chwyddiant ac yn y blaen. Ac mae'r gyllideb ger bron heddiw mewn ffigurau yn yr adroddiad. Ac dwi'n meddwl bod rhaid chi fynd holl ffordd i tudalen 60 o'r pecyn lle mae'n dangos yr ardoll ar yr awdurdodau cyfansoddol. Ond mae hwnnw ar gyfartaledd tua 8.8%. Mae'n amrywio rhwng yr awdurdodau unigol oherwydd bod effaith y census ar y ffigurau poblogaeth sy'n rhannu'r swm rhwng yr awdurdodau. Wedyn mae'r union swm mae bob cyngor yn dygymod efo'n amrywio, ond yn gyffredinol mae rheini sy'n cael mwy o gynnydd mewn lefi gennym ni wedi cael mwy o grant gan y Llywodraeth i ddilio efo hynny i adlewyrchu poblogaeth. Wedyn, oedden ni yn cychwyn, dwi'n meddwl, y daith yma o tua 13%, neu hyd yn oed ar ôl edrych ar yr chwyddiant anwrfod, oedd hynny'n mynd â ni at 15% o gynnydd. Mae'r gweithgor wedi gwneud gwaith gwych i ddod â hwnnw lawr i tua 11%, ac ers hynny, mi ddaru'r Pwyllgor Archwilio ofyn i ni edrych am fwy o arbedion i drio dod â hwnna dan 10%. Mae'r sefyllfa o ran y defnydd y reserfa yn y flwyddyn da ni newydd ddelio efo yn golygu fedra ni ddefnyddio rhywfaint mwy o'r reserfa wrth osod y gyllideb yma i ddod ar gyllideb arfaethedig lawr i lefel lle mae'r cynnydd cyfartalog yn 8.85%. Mae hynny am fod yn help i'r cynghorau cyfansoddol, ac dwi'n credu hefyd bod yn deg deud bod ni wedi cael llythyr gen y gweinidog yn Llywodraeth Cymru sydd yn rhoi pwysau ni. Mae'r llythyr chydig bach yn feg, ond mae yn rhoi pwysau ni i drio dod ar cynnydd mewn ardoll i lefel rhesymol. Wrth gwrs, byddwn ni'n licio dod â hwnna'n is ar ran yn cynghorau cyfansoddol ni, ond dwi'n credu bod y gweithgor o'r Pwyllgor Archwilio wedi gwneud gwaith da iawn i ddod â fo lawr i'r lefel yna, a gan bod yr hyblygrwydd gennym ni i ddefnyddio elfen o reserfa un tro, dwi'n credu bod yr argymhelliad ger bron i gynyddu'r lefi 8.85% yn resymol yn yr amgylchiadau, ac dwi'n pasio Helen am i fynd drwy mwy o'r manylder.
Diolch, Dafydd. This paper is actually a series of budget setting papers that have been presented to yourselves as members. It's actually the third one. So it builds on these previous reports and confirms the proposed budget for 2024-25. And it also sets out the financial outlook of the medium term, which is contained within the medium term resource strategy. As David has just explained, it's actually been quite a busy period, and I think it would be remiss of me not to recognise the work both of the finance team, but also of the budget scrutiny working group. We started that work in October, primarily so that we could understand the constituent elements of the budget, look for opportunities to contain costs, and also get that assurance for yourselves as members that everything is being done to manage our expenditure within these very, very difficult times. This year is especially complex, due in part to the emergency cover review. Also, though, due to inflation, high interest rates, and outstanding pay awards. And aside from the emergency cover review, these issues are not unique to ourselves. They're also being experienced by your own local authorities, but also the public sector as a whole. The emergency cover review included the need to work towards financial stability, and the budget proposals presented today are based on the direction given by yourselves as members in terms of that service delivery. Notwithstanding that, the specific detail of the ECR hasn't been concluded, but the budget is predicated on the decisions made, which include the underlying staffing levels for whole-time operational staff, and that remains the same. Given the outcome of the ECR and the financial challenges faced by our local authorities, the work of the Budget Scrutiny Group has been an important feature of the budget setting process. David's just touched on some of the detail of that, which included the budget actually increasing beyond that 13.5 before we were able to bring it back down. And that work was reported in detail to both the Audit Committee and the Executive Panel at their meetings of the 18th of December. At that time, so in December, the planning assessment confirmed a gross budget requirement of 49.2 million, which represented a 10.8 increase year on year to our constituent local authorities. Members will recall that this addressed the underlying deficit from 23-24. It also considered the impact of pay awards above the planning assessment and the unavoidable service pressures that we've experienced in 24-5. Since that time, however, the Welsh Government's financial settlement for local authorities has been published. That was published on, I believe, the 19th of December. And that laid bare the financial challenges being faced. And within this, we lost grant funding in relation to our arson reduction work, and the impact of which we've needed to absorb in the short term at least, and we've had to include that in our own budget planning. Aside from the reduction in grants, the final gross planning assessment is broadly consistent with that reported to members in December. However, as set out in that report, detailed work to review the opportunity to utilise reserves has been undertaken. And in this respect, I must make members aware that using reserves to support the funding of core services isn't permitted, and the proposals outlined today to utilise reserves have only been made for exceptional one-off or non-recurring expenditure. It's proposed to utilise £900,000 of reserves, which has limited the levy increase to 8.9%. I would also draw members' attention to the breakdown for each local authority. I believe that's on page 20 of the medium-term resource strategy, and I certainly know in the English version it's on page 57. And you will note that the actual increase ranges from just over 4% to over 11%. This is actually something beyond the scope of the Fire Authority and reflects the work of the Welsh Government's distribution subgroup, and your own Section 151 officers, your Directors of Finance, will be fully cognisant of this and aware of the detailed implications for each local authority. The final budget proposal has carefully considered and revisited all of the planning assumptions made. But again, I must caution members of the residual risks and uncertainties. And whilst the majority of these will be managed by the service, there are a small number that are worthy of specific mention. Within the budget today, the planning assessment is for an annual uplift of 4% on pay. However, mindful that this has not been agreed, this remains a key area of uncertainty and risk. And the impact would be in the order of £340,000 for each 1% of pay. In the December meetings, I outlined that the firefighters' pension scheme valuation was outstanding. And although at that time I was confident that it would be concluded by now, that is sadly not the case. So again, this remains a risk to us, but I'm comfortable that we've taken a prudent approach. And outside of this meeting, we will work with our Director of Finance colleagues to ensure that the level of that risk is fully known. We anticipate that there will be financial support, but at this point, and we understand also that that financial support may be given directly to local authorities, but whether it's going to be available and the value of it, we're unclear of at this stage. And finally, the budget has been set using normal activity levels and will be monitored during the year. However, members will need to be mindful that should there be spate conditions, such as higher than average number of wildfires or adverse weather incidents such as flooding, that there is no contingency within the budget set to support that, and it will be necessary to look to utilise reserves. A key feature of the revenue spend is the consequence of the capital programme, and the medium-term resource strategy contains a 10-year capital plan, which is based on returns from our departments and aligns to the community risk management plan that will come to yourselves over the next couple of months. Page 9 of the document refers, and members will note, that the main areas of capital expenditure include ICT upgrades, training tyre replacements, which are essential to building and maintaining firefighter skills, station improvements, and sustainability works, as well as a range of vehicles. And those vehicles include not only frontline fire appliances, but also our special vehicles, such as the aerial ladder platform, as well as other vehicles necessary to fulfil our objectives. The proposed capital budget for 2024-5 is 5.7 million, including the rollover of schemes that haven't completed this financial year. The only source of funding for ourselves for capital schemes is borrowing. And whilst the authority has benefited from lower interest rates in recent years, this is sadly no longer the case. And the capital financing costs are expected to grow over the medium term. And this reflects both the capital plan, but also the increased costs of refinancing loans when they come up to maturity. As David has touched on, the budget for the future year includes a proposal to utilise earmarked reserves of 900,000. And page 14 of the resource strategy provides more detailed analysis of the existing reserves and the planned use. Notably, at the end of 2025, the earmarked reserves are forecast to reduce to £4.4 million, albeit that we have a further 1.5 of general fund. The general fund reserves sit at 3% of expenditure, which will be sufficient to manage short-term financial shocks, such as higher than expected activities. But should that occur, these will need to be replenished. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions the members may have on the report.
Thank you, Helen. And can I just say that it is pleasing to note that the proposed increase now has been brought down below 10% to 8.85%. And can I also add my congratulations to the work of the Budget Scrutiny Working Group. And I can see that members have raised their hands wishing to ask questions. But can I first of all invite the chair of that working group and the chair of the Audit Committee, Councillor Mark Young, to see if he wants to make any comments. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, Bodadar, thank you, Chair, and thank you, David and Helen, for the report. And I won't get too political on a Monday morning, Chair, but I do find the Minister's letter to us asking us to be careful with the increase at the same time as Welsh Government takes another 600,000 off us. I've got that off my chest, so I'll leave that there. So I can confirm that the working group and officers were mindful of the cost of living crisis, and we had a good working relationship with officers. It was a good challenge. It was respectful. I hope that work carries on in the future, because I think the involvement of members is crucial, and that responsibility. So my questions are we okay with the risks? Because the report says we are, but it also talks about the risks. So are we okay with the risks of using reserves? And what happens if we have the perfect storm? How would we deal with that? And some members during the work with the working group asked for confirmation of communication with local authorities if we set this today. So the risk and the communications after that, Chair, would be very much appreciated there. But joking about for everyone on the committee and the officers for work, and yourself for that support, please. Joking about.
Thank you, Mark. Can I invite Helen to respond to those questions? Thank you, Helen.
Thank you very much. I think it's absolutely correct to be mindful of that risk. I'm satisfied that the proposal to utilise reserves for the 24-25 financial year is based on expenditure that is non-recurring or exceptional. I guess there are a number of potential residual risks, pay, pensions, and also spate conditions. Should that happen, it will be necessary to revisit the use of general fund reserves. So I think that would give members a mechanism to manage it in the short term. But should that happen, there will be a need to bolster those reserves in future years. I don't know if you want me to touch on the communication to members. I think there's two elements of the communication. The first one is to yourselves as members, and after this meeting, I will produce a briefing paper for members. But also, I will ensure outside of this meeting that that David and myself engage with the directors of finance, the 151 officers from local authorities, to ensure that they're cited on the budget, the impact for their own local authority, but also the residual risks that we're carrying. And I hope that satisfies Councillor Young.
I presume that it does. Is that okay, Mark?
Yeah, no, talking about that, that's fine. And we can't get away from the risk, but I think we're in the best place we can be, and we've got a process of managing it if it happens. So, Jock and Val, Helen, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next person to raise his hand is Councillor Jeff Evans. Thank you, Jeff.
Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, no problem, Jeff.
Okay, so Mr. Chairman, these are difficult, unprecedented times, and the pressures on everybody, be it fire authorities, be it councils, be it just society at large. The pressures on society are greater than they've ever been. And originally, when I've been in audit meetings of the fire authority, and I heard percentages of levy of up to 15% proposed, that was unacceptable to me. It was difficult for me to comprehend, and the financial pressures on the community would have caused untold future difficulties, especially as to affordability by the community at large. I have been adamant and vociferous that we as a fire and rescue authority looked for and implemented all measures to identify and play below a double figure increase. And as such, I now want to applaud and thank everybody who listened, everybody who ensured that the levy has now been indicated and placed at 8.8%. I didn't think it might have been possible, but it has been done. And I think everybody needs to appreciate the work that has been put into that. However, notwithstanding that, I believe we must continue to be as prudent as possible, thus ensuring that future years' levies are also identified and placed at the budget level as low as possible, whilst not having any adverse effects on the future service. So thank you to everybody concerned. I think we're still in a different time. We still have to but I want to thank the team, because this has been teamwork, partnership working at its best. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jeff, for those positive comments. The next person, Councillor Brian Apsley. Morning, Brian.
Good morning, Chair. I'm going to observe the Chief's words on respect and not delve into political arguments this morning and mention London, etc. But a question for Helen, really, that perhaps I should have taken more notice when I was in school, but obviously far too late for that. Are the apportionments stable? And if so, how do we get a wide range of percentage increases? For example, I'm not picking on Anglesey and Gwynedd, just compare Anglesey with Gwynedd. Gwynedd is almost double the levy of Anglesey, but an actual total less increase in the actual levy. I know you mentioned a working group that gets involved in this, but could you explain that? Well, I think it's a mathematical quandary for me. I don't understand that position. Obviously, it's on page 57, and I just looking at the figures, I just don't understand. Anglesey 4.8 million levy, Gwynedd 8.2, yet the increase in levy to Gwynedd is 343,000, and the increase to Anglesey is 445. I don't understand the balance. So possibly, can I go back to the first question? Are the apportionments stable year on year? Thank you.
Give you a question, Brian, a very valid one. And I can see that the Treasurer, David, has got his hand up, who's going to explain the answer, I presume. David.
Ionawr, Mr. Cadeirydd. I'll say it in English, Brian, so that we're on the same page. Yes, the apportionment of the levy is based on population.
Yes.
The local government grant is also based on population, and the population they use is discussed annually by a group called the DSG, Distribution Subgroup, and they agree the relevant population figures to be used. The current year change, and that's why there's a disparity between those increases for individual authorities, is due to phasing in the impact of the last census population figures. And as it happens, at that time, there was a big reduction in census population in Gwynedd, to a degree in Conwy, etc. Whereas in certain areas such as Denbighshire, there was more of an increase in population. That means, as I said previously, that the grants received, those councils received from the Welsh Government will go the other way, so that those authorities seeing a big increase, a relative increase in the fire levy, those have been funded by Welsh governments to meet that cost. Whereas in Gwynedd and Conwy, there's been more of a reduction in population, a reduction in relative government grants. So that's where their increase is less, because it reflects that same population figure. Those population figures are consistent between the grants to the authorities and what we use to calculate the levy. In terms of stability going forward, I believe that these figures have now played out in terms of the last census data, and when we discuss this matter in a year's time, those increases for the individual authorities will be a lot closer together.
Diolch yn fawr, David. Brian, does that answer your question?
It does answer my question, but I'm still confused. There's a heck of a difference if you just look at the actual figures. You know, the 4.8 million to 8.2, and then a lesser of a payment for Gwynedd than for Gwynedd in particular to Anglesey. It just I'll take your word for it, David, and carry on.
It's on the margins, Brian, and yeah, obviously Anglesey's population total is much less than Gwynedd. That's why their total figure is less, but the increase is because there's an increase in population in Anglesey and a decrease in Gwynedd. At least that's the perceived increase and decrease from the last census data.
Thank you.
Next person who's got his hands raised is Councillor Gareth Sandlands. Good morning, Gareth.
Good morning, Bora. It's a question regarding the use of reserves. We're going to plug the gap with at £900,000 plus. For my understanding of accounts, it's you only use reserves when it's justified. If you can give us an example of those one-off costs, because you can only plug it once. Once it's gone, it's gone. Our credit card is also getting the level of debt concerns me, where it jumps £4 million this year, and in future years it's going to a record level of debt. So I'd like some explanation on how we use reserves. In Denbighshire, we are now only capital spending where we can save money. So any project, such as if we're going to repair a roof, we stick a PV solar panel on it. I'd love to know if we're doing the same on the saving money in the future. And also, when we look at accountancy in the future on budgets, because of the pressures, we're doing it not just on a one-off workshop we're doing it constantly, month by month, involving members. It's getting to the pressure of future years will be even worse in the short term. We're talking in the next 2 or 3 years. So while we're saving £900,000 using reserves this year, are we just leaving it till the following years to build it up? So on page 57 of the overall pack, it shows that there, and it is quite a concern, particularly when you get to 26, 27, and there is over £30 million of debt attached to the fire and rescue service, which will of course have an effect on an annual revenue because it has an interest charge. So that interest charge is a huge concern, and I'd like some clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, Gareth. Over to Helen, I think. Do you want to answer that, Helen?
Yes, of course. I think there's a number of different strands within that. So I'm going to probably start with the Budget Scrutiny Working Group and the suggestion that it meets more regularly. And that absolutely resonates with a discussion that Councillor Mark Young and myself have had. I don't think we can underestimate the benefit from both sides of that group meeting. And I think what we would like to do is stand that group up as soon as possible, have a programme of work that actually has the opportunity of looking at some of the aspects that you've just raised in that level of detail. I'll touch first on the question of reserves. You're entirely right. The use of reserves, does it produce a problem for future years? I think the acid test are the reserves being used for those core services that we intend to deliver this year, next year, and into the future? I can give assurances that we've used it for one-off or exceptional spend. So by way of an example, as an organisation, we've introduced Microsoft 365. That has with it, that has with it some one-off exceptional costs, and it's proposed that they will be funded through reserves. In addition, we've items such as the wildfire kit, and within our reserve, we do have already an earmarked reserve for uniform, for kit. And given that we don't currently have wildfire kit, it would seem appropriate to use the reserve for that purpose. And then as that kit is replaced or on an ongoing basis, it will then form part of our core cost. But that single cost of bringing it into the service will be borne through reserves. And then lastly, Councillor Sandilands, you touched on the impact of capital. Our borrowing in previous years has been between 26 and 28 million. We've had the opportunity in very recent years of using our internal resources to keep those borrowing costs as low as we possibly can. And absolutely, I think that should be part of the scrutiny of the Budget Scrutiny Working Group. The capital programme at the moment is predicated on essential expenditure, which includes the replacement of fire appliances. Our replacement programme is currently 17 or 18 years. Across the sector, the average is 15. So ours are run for a longer period, primarily because some of them do a relatively low mileage. We don't take them out of service because they've become obsolete. They tend to have to be replaced because we simply can't get the parts. So I think I would like to give you assurance that the capital programme is for essential, but wherever possible, we absolutely do as much as we can around sustainability. So if we replace boilers, we are always looking at what the option might be to whether it be heating and light in a different way, and the use of solar panels. So it is definitely work in progress for us. But I think sort of bringing that all together, absolutely, the Budget Scrutiny Working Group is I think pivotal to that joint working between officers and members, and giving you the assurance you quite correctly need. Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Helen. And the next person who's got his hand up is Councillor Marion Bateman. Good morning, Marion.
Good morning, Chair. When calculating the levy on each individual authority, as well as population, do you take into consideration the Barnett formula? And how much each individual authority gets from the Barnett formulas calculation?
Not particularly, Marion. The Barnett formula is operational in devolving money from Whitehall to Cardiff Bay, but there's a different formula for the local government settlements within Wales. So we don't look at Barnett, we look at the same population figures as the Welsh Government use to spread the money within Wales. Thank
you. It's just that the Barnett formula is used to determine how much uplift, if you'd like, or how much money, rather, each individual council gets from the Welsh Government, sorry. And it's just a little gripe. Flintshire is always at the bottom, well, 20th out of 22. And we're always near the top of the fire authority when it comes to the levy. It's just a little gripe. Thank you. I'm going to be more pleasant, though, in 2024. I've decided. There's my resolution.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Chair. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I think you're quite right, Marion, in terms of there are a number of local authorities that are unhappy with the current funding formula that Welsh Government use to allocate money to local authorities, but that may be a discussion for another day. Councillor Mark Young, you got your hand raised. Do you want to come back in, Mark? Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's just come back on a couple of points. And Helen, can you just confirm, please, who works out who pays what from the authorities? I think there's a separate working group. I don't think it's the fire authority. So can you just confirm who does it? And David, we have talked about doing forward looking more with the accounts. Just any thoughts on that? Because I think Councillor Sandlin comes up with some valid points, and I think that forward looking would really help us with in these financial times.
Thank you. I'll certainly pick up the first aspect of that. The funding formula is developed by the Welsh Government as part of its distribution subgroup. It isn't just Welsh Government officials that sit on that group. There is representation from local authorities, and I understand there's, I think, 2 representatives from North Wales, and that's to ensure that the impact of that work is understood and communicated. But it's very much the population figures are given to us, and the mechanism of calculating the levy based on population is a given. So sadly, our flexibility within that is non-existent. Taking all of the concerns raised, I think it's fair to say that the directors of finance within the local authorities, the 151 officers, are fully appraised and cognizant of this, that actually it is I suppose it's a macro issue around the funding rather than a micro issue that's caused by ourselves. I think it is something that we would legitimately raise in any communication with officials around the transparency of the funding for fire and rescue authorities.
Thank you, Helen.
With regard to forward looking, Councillor Mark Young's question is a good one, actually, and I think Helen, myself and the councillor will be convening the budget scrutiny working group at an earlier stage in the current financial year, so that we can continue to get into the detail and do some more work by next year. Wedyn, gyda'ch cytundeb chi, byddan ni'n edrych I drefnu hynny yn ystod y flwyddyn.
Diolch, David. I can see that the clerk to the authority has his hand raised. Bod I, Gareth?
Brodar Cadeirydd. Thank you, Chair. I think members' questions indicate some of the difficulty that ACFO MacArthur referred to around the transparency of funding, or lack thereof, for funding of the fire authority. There are, of course, 2 different formulas at play. There is the Welsh Local Government or there is the local government funding formula that takes into account not only population but also issues such as deprivation. So there are authorities within North Wales that receive higher levels per capita funding than their neighbours because of levels of deprivation, as well as funding on just on straight population numbers. That formula takes into account a wide range of other factors as well, such as rural density and so on. The distribution of costs of the fire authority are by straight population numbers, so taking no account of those other factors such as density or deprivation. And the fact that you have those different formulas leads, even to questions amongst well-informed people like councillors, and councillors on the fire authority. So heaven knows where it must leave our residents, and that is why, Chair, isn't it? As an authority, we have been pushing for the power to precept, and the differences and the difficulties that have arisen this year, I think, simply underline and underscore the message that members have been pushing consistently, or pressing for consistently, that it is, if Welsh Government are looking at the governance of fire authorities, it now is the time to make fire authorities precepting authorities, so that their funding can be put onto a transparent basis in the same way as county councils and the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Thank you for your comments, Gareth, and I'm sure that our representatives from Audit Wales who are on this meeting will take note of what's just been said. Mark, you've still got your hand up. Is that the legacy hand?
No, it's
Yes,
down. I'm happy.
I can't see any other hands raised. Does anybody else have any questions that they wish to ask on this report? No, then can I draw your attention to the recommendations? That there are 7 of them, which is at paragraph 5 of the report, and I'll read those out now. Members are asked to note the findings of the Budget Scrutiny Working Group, including the planning assumptions used to develop the revenue budget for 2024-25. Approve the financial planning assessment of a net budget requirement of £48.322 million for 2024-25, including the use of earmarked reserves of 0.924 million. Note the requirement to review the arson reduction activity during 2024-25 to consider the future provision following the grant reductions. Note the residual risks and uncertainties faced by the authority in 2024-25 in respect of a nationally agreed pay awards and financial support for the anticipated pension increases. Approve the final planning assessment of £5.67 million for the capital programme for 2024-25. Note the 10-year capital plan and the separate requirement to consider the business case for the new training centre during 2024-25. And endorse the communication of the financial levy to each constituent local authority. Can I have somebody to propose the recommendations, please? Thank you, Mark. Seconder. Gareth, can you put your hands up to show that you agree, please? Diolch yn fawr. That's been overwhelmingly passed. So we go on to item number 9, which is the Treasury Management Update for 2023-24. And back to you again, Helen, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is the final finance report today, and the purpose of this is to provide yourselves with an update on the Treasury management activity of the authority, and also report against those prudential indicators for the period 1st of April through to the 30th of September. A full report will be produced after the year end. And I'm also pleased to confirm that this report has previously been presented and submitted to the Audit Committee for scrutiny, and they were supportive that it should be approved by yourselves. It might be helpful to provide a little bit of context to this report. Treasury management covers the borrowing of funds for the authority's capital programme and also the investing of surplus cash. And there are broadly 2 principles that we follow. We're only permitted to borrow for capital purposes, Therefore, we don't borrow for day-to-day revenue, and we only invest working capital. We don't borrow unnecessarily ahead of need to speculate with investments. Our sources of borrowing include the Public Loans Work Board, which is a HM Treasury-backed source of borrowing, or other local authorities. So if they have surplus cash, they will lend that to us. Our investments are limited to depositing with our own banks or the Debt Management Office, which is the other side of HM Treasury. It's the deposit side. The area of Treasury management is highly regulated and also technical, and we utilise the professional services of Treasury management advisors. They work across the public sector, and they're known as Arling Close. They provide advice, guidance and assessment on the debt portfolio and also an overview of the economy as a whole. Although the public sector has benefited from lower interest rates for a number of years, the current position is much more challenging. So I guess the external context is that CPI remains higher than anticipated, although we have seen in the third quarter reductions. What that means for us is that any borrowing that we now undertake, we can work on the principle of loans being at 5.25%. We've adopted a number of prudential indicators, and that provides assurance to yourselves as members that the borrowing investments are made in accordance with the strategy, notably that all borrowing is within the authorised limit. And I'd refer you to Table 6 of the report, and that the borrowing itself complies in terms of the maturity profile. So very much that the borrowing has to be affordable and reasonable and sustainable. The liability benchmark, which is contained within paragraph 34, shows that the authority will be a borrower for the longer term based on its existing commitments. The cash investments are managed on a daily basis by the finance team, and at the end of September, £7 million was on deposit with the authority's banks, with a further £2 million placed with the Debt Management Office. And again, both of these deposits are within the limits approved by members. The cash balance at the end of September reflected the phasing of the capital programme and the revenue expenditure. And the recommendation is for members to note the activity and the position and approve this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Just to reiterate, this report has already gone through the Audit Committee and has been scrutinised and approved. Do members have any questions, please? I can't see any hands raised, so can somebody therefore propose that we note the report as per the recommendation, please? Thank you, Jeff. Seconder. Thank you, Gareth. Can you show your hands that you approve? That's been passed. So the last item on the agenda is item number 10, which is the Gifts and Hospitality Policy, and I'll hand over to the clerk. Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. As members will see from the report, this is a periodic review of the Gifts and Hospitality Policy to make sure that it remains up to date. What the policy team have done is they've set it into a slightly new format and split it so that you've got a policy and a procedure. The documents were reported to the Standards Committee, and the Standards Committee made a number of recommendations, as members will see from page 69, paragraph 4. They wanted to see the addition of a clause requiring registration of gifts with an aggregate value over £100. So this is where gifts are received over a rolling period of 12 months to a total value of more than £100. They should be registered as well as any gift over a value of £25. That the register should be checked at least once per year, and the Standards Committee asked that consideration should be given to whether the requirements are the same for firefighters, and that is the case. They simply said, look, have a look and have a think about whether they should be the same for firefighters and office staff, and indeed that is the proposal, that's it in relation to the report, really, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Gareth. Are there any questions in relation to this report? I can't see any hands being raised, and as you point out, it's already been to the Standards Committee. So can I have somebody to propose that we do accept the report? Thank you, Councillor Chris Hughes. Seconder. Just looking round for a seconder again.
Chair. Councillor Claydon is seconded.
Great, thank you. That's excellent. Can you raise your hands to show that you approve? Diolch yn fawr. That has been passed. That brings the meeting to an end. Can I thank everybody for their attendance and contributions? Diolch yn fawr. A hwyl fawr. Take care.
Diolch, Cadeirydd.
Hwyl.
Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch yn fawr.
Cool.